Hello everybody, welcome to English on Friday the 26th of February with Mrs. Craven. So let's start with some retrieval. Can you tell me some new words we have discovered or learnt in our book this week, Jack and the Beanstalk? I'll show you the front cover. Here we go. Now, we did look at a couple of pages in particular, and you may have looked at them with Mrs. Brackenbury, but any words you can remember is absolutely fine. Anything that you thought was new or different. So if you just want to pause the video and just have a little think, and I'll flick through my book as you're doing that. See you in a few minutes. Right, now whilst you've been thinking, I've been having a look through the book and I've come to one of the special pages that we did look at. Now, I don't know if you can remember, I'll get you in the camera, this page. Now, it's a bit hard for you to see. Now, I'll read it to you. What a marvellous feast! There was an enormous loaf of bread and a gigantic jar of jam. Jack tucked in at once. So, I know that we may have discussed with Mrs. Brackenbury, there were definitely some words on this page that we'd have talked about. So we've talked about enormous, we've talked about the word loaf, the loaf of bread, we've thought about the word gigantic, and you may have also talked about the word tucked. What does tucked in mean? You can tuck yourself into bed, but we may have talked about what it means when you get tucked into food once you eat it. On this page, on the opposite page, here we go, oh, get the camera right, it says that suddenly the room began to shake. Boom, boom, boom. Goodness me, cried the giantess, he's coming. And she shoved Jack under a teacup to hide. We discussed other words you could use instead of saying boom, boom, boom. So maybe you can remember some new words you thought of instead of boom, boom, boom. We talked about what giantess means. We've often heard of the word giant, but we found out what giantess means this week. Lady giant. So, if you remembered any of those words, well done. If you thought of words yourself from the text that I didn't mention, that's fantastic as well. Well done to you. It didn't just have to be words from those pages. Now, today we are learning to use new vocabulary, so new words, to tell a known story with expression. So that means telling your story with an interesting voice and using character voices. And to be successful today, we need to be able to use some of the new words from Jack and the Beanstalk to retell our story if we can, because we're going to use our own words to do it. We're not just going to read it from the story, children. To make it interesting. We don't want it to sound boring. So try and use interesting story language. And if you can use some of the words and phrases from the story, that would be great. And also to be able to retell Jack and the Beanstalk with expression. And I just mentioned expression a moment ago. That means having an interesting voice, using different tones in your voice. So your voice could go up or down, having a deep voice for the giant, maybe a higher voice for Jack, using character voices, making your voice sound interesting. Now, question for you to think about, children. What do you think is important when someone is reading a story? I may have just given you a few clues. What must you think about? What do you like someone's voice to sound like when they're telling you a good story? So put your thinking cap on, spend a moment having a think. What makes a good storyteller? Just pause and have a think. Wow, I wonder what you thought of. Some of the things you might have thought of were the person reading a story or retelling a story needs to have a clear voice. We don't want to mutter. We need to have a clear voice so we can hear the story. They need to tell the story in an interesting way. They need to have an expressive voice. So if there's an exciting part of the story, they need to make their voice exciting. If it's scary, they need to use their voice to show you it's scary. If there are characters, they need to change their voice so you know which character they're pretending to be. And it's also very important to keep your head up when you're talking or reading to people. If you look down at the floor, your voice will go to the floor and people won't be able to hear you. So well done if you thought of any of those things, or if you thought of anything extra, well done to you too. Now I am going to model, that means I'm going to show you reading the beginning of Jack and the Beanstalk. I am going to see how you think I read it. That's your job. I'm going to read it to you and you're going to see how I do. Tell me how I do, children. And if I do well, you could say, Mrs. Craven, these are the things I think you did well. Or listen out for things that I could improve. So you're thinking, is Mrs. Craven being a good reader, a good storyteller, or is she not doing a very good job? Has she remembered the things that were on the previous slide? See how I do, boys and girls. Here's my book, and I'm going to do some reading to you. Have I remembered the top tips, or have I not? Deep in the countryside lived a widow and her son Jack. Their cottage was crumbling and their clothes were patched. They were very, very poor. How did I do? Did I read it clearly? No, I didn't. I was mumbling. Dear Mrs. Craven. Did I look up when I was reading? No, I didn't. I was looking down and my voice was going down to my socks. Oh dear, Mrs. Craven. Well, did I read it with an interesting voice? No, I read it like this. I didn't read it interestingly. I sounded like a boring robot. I didn't read it with expression. I didn't change my voice. I didn't use character voices. There weren't any characters in that part, but even if there were, I wouldn't have changed my voice. I didn't remember any of my tips, boys and girls. I didn't do a very good job. Oh, I think I should try again. I'm going to try again. I'll read the next part of the book and see how I do this time. Okay, listen out. One day, Jack's mother said, "We must sell our cow. Take her to market, Jack, and bring home some gold pieces." And so he set off to town. Oh, how did I do that time? Shall we see? Now, did I have my head up this time? Yes, I did. Was I muttering this time? No, I didn't mutter. I made sure I used a clear voice and I tried to keep my voice clear and interesting. Now, I had to sound like Jack's mum because she was talking. So I used a different voice for Jack's mum. So I used a character voice and expression. So I get a thumbs up for that as well. So this time I used my top tips and I became a much better speaker and storyteller. So, better job for me, I think. So, try and remember those tips when you become storyteller, because we want thumbs up, not a thumbs down like I got at the beginning. Now, main task for everybody today. So, children, you are going to retell the story of Jack and the Beanstalk. You're going to retell it in your own words. You're not going to read from a book like I did. You're going to use your story map from yesterday, the one that you drew and have in your books, the one you had yesterday. So you need to get that out and get that ready, because that's what you're going to use to retell the story in your own words. Now, if you're at school, you're going to retell the story to your friends. And if you're at home, you're going to retell the story to your grown-up. So, we need to remember, boys and girls, that we're retelling Jack and the Beanstalk, which is a traditional tale. So we need to remember to include story language. Think about the words we're going to use to start our story. We need to think about introducing the characters when we're retelling our story and what we might make them say. What does the giant say in the story quite a lot? What does Jack say? How does the story end? What is the story language that you could use at the end of the story that we hear a lot in traditional tales? Remember to change your voices, everybody. So when Jack's talking, will he have the same voice as the giant? How will each of the characters sound? If you have put in the hen or the chicken in your story, then you need to think, if he's going to talk, how will he sound? These are all things you need to consider. As well as that, remember, top tip in the bubble on the page, clear voice, use expression, look up, don't look down at the floor. Remember also to pause, take a breath, don't go on and 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 on. Take some breaths in between. Try and use some story language and retell your story from the start to the middle to the end. And your story map will help you to do that, to retell it in the right order. Now, children, to support you with this, you might want to practice saying it a few times, and each time you'll get better and better and think of ways that you can improve it and add to it. Remember, we're not writing anything down today. We're not drawing anything. We are just using our voices and our brains and looking at our story map to retell the story in our own words. Now, adults, you can support children with helping them, reminding them what story language they could use, and helping them to remember the structure of the story as they go along. Now, if you'd like to fly high, you could think of a new saying for the giant. So instead of him saying fee, fi, fo, fum, maybe you could write down a new catchphrase, a new saying that you want the giant to say, and then practice saying it in a giant's voice and use that in your story instead. That's something you could try. See how you get on. If you'd like to video or record yourselves practicing your retelling and using your voice well, we'd love to see that.